What's up, everyone? Welcome to TalkdaTalk. I'm so excited to be here with you. If you don't know, I'm telling you up front, I am flying solo today without my buddy, my good friend Steve, who has a lot of things to say. He loves the show. He could not be here today, and I'll just say it up front because his sister, Mary Beth, has passed away. Steve and his family, our prayers are with you. I've been praying for Steve, and I'm asking you to join me in just even right now, take a pause and pray for him and his family. His sister went to sleep and did not wake up the next morning. And of course, as somebody who's close to Steve and his family, our heart's broken with you, and we're with him in spirit. And of course, we're with the family of Mary Beth, Mike, and so forth. On a personal note, I knew Mary Beth a lot. I knew her children. I've known Steve's family forever. And Mary Beth was a feisty, hardworking, loving, opinionated like most of us, person who, if you had any kind of problem or need, she would be there for you. And it was funny. While she had a great sense of humor and a lot of opinions on a lot of stuff, and she'd argue and fight with you, and she was fun to be around. And sometimes, like all of us, like she threw her opinions out there and stood on them. So it was a privilege to know her, a privilege. She was one of the people that supported our ministry. For those who don't know, I am a missionary, and she was one of those that supported our mission and our ministry. So she was just dearly loved all the way around. She loved the Lord. She had a great family behind her, and she is just going to be super missed. So again, keep Steve and his family in his prayers. And I'm going to continue to do the show today. We're going to do it a little bit different today because why? Because I'm doing it solo, and it's a lot more fun to do it with Steve than to do it without. But I do have some things we can talk about. As you know, the news cycle is always rolling, and it never shortens us. So we're going to get to that. But thanks for taking the time to watch TalkdaTalk. I also want to say, we are on YouTube, so we need you to subscribe, and we need you to share. We need you to share this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe on the Podbean app, which is it's a podcasting app you can get on any platform, meaning any phone you have. And it'll be great to listen to you, great to get subscribers, and great to get some feedback both ways. So go to YouTube, go to Podbean, and of course you can be part of our Facebook group. We want to hear from you. We keep hearing from B. Miller out there, and B. Miller, we love it, and I appreciate you listening. Along with several of you who I'm getting tons of feedback from. So that's amazing. We wanted to do a show that was for everyone, where we could give our opinions. I do a podcasting show about our ministry and what we do and the things that we talk about there. So you can go to Inference Swap and check that out. But this is more about what's happening in our world in relationship to who we are and as people, as Americans, and as Christians. And so today I'm going to talk, just to give you a little overview what's going to happen today. We're going to talk a little bit about Biden's speech and Biden himself. We're going to talk about, are you a Cuomosexual? All the stuff going on with Cuomo. Can you believe they're called Cuomosexuals? We'll get to that. And I basically have my top 5 pickup lines by Governor Cuomo that we're going to go through there. And then, what I'm going to do, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast. We might, tone it down a little bit, get a little more serious, but I want to talk about critical race theory, intersectionality, and of course, gender dysphoria, which seems to be the dominant themes in our culture right now that are pushed by an administration that started back in the Obama era, that has been pushed by an administration for the purposes of social engineering. And I think it has a lot to do with God, a lot to do with getting to the next generation, to fundamentally change how we view each other, how we view the world, and how we view God or not God in the world. And I'm going to get a little deep there. I'm going to just, talk about what that is. As somebody who just got off the campus at Butler, this was what we're seeing on campuses over the last 10, 20 years are now playing out in the reality that we live in all of our country and all of our nation, especially the news, who are pushing an agenda. And to be honest, I believe it's a godless agenda, and we'll get into that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well, and then I'm going to get out of here and get out of your hair. So we have a good show in front of you, and I think it's going to be a little bit fun. So we're going to jump right into it. How many people last night, and I hope you're watching this on YouTube, because I do have things I'm going to be showing today. And if you see me jumping all over in front of you, it's because I have a couple screens in front of me here, and I'm sort of sat off to the side because I want to show you some of the things that are going on, some pictures and things like that. Now, the first one is we have Biden, and we had his presidential, I guess that was a State of the Union. I don't even know what that was. My first impressions of it was, I do think, to a degree, he was trying to be encouraging to the nation. But my gosh, I think it takes a very strong talent to go up there and say a whole lot of nothing for 24 minutes straight. And what's funny is, there's a lot of pushback on it for a couple reasons. One, he's not taking questions because they're afraid that he can't take questions, that he can't get out a complete thought. Much like our politicians of the past, he obviously is reading a script off of a teleprompter, and so he's just trying to get through that without losing train of thought or not remembering names. This week he was in the middle of his speech and forgot his foreign minister's name. In the middle of the speech, he was standing off to the side. They're just protecting him and not taking questions from him, which is insane. But what do you do? Thank God America is as powerful as they are, because if we looked at him like a strong leader, we would be in a lot of trouble. And really, is he a strong leader? He's really a pushover for the left and their agenda. And there's no saying that this isn't true. And we're going to get into that because I'm going to show you some of his executive orders here in a second. But another thing that was a controversy last night, which this is something that I picked up, and if you can see the picture above me, it's a picture of, I forgot his name, but one of Jeff Dunham's puppets, which everybody compares Biden to. But it says, "Do what I say and maybe we'll let you celebrate Independence Day." And this seemed to be the theme. If you just do what I say, do what I say, do what I say, do what the government tells you, then by listening to your new mom and dad, which as if that's their place, you're going to have the freedom and will allow you to have people over. Now, I can tell you that as a missionary, I'm a unique kind of missionary. There's only two people doing what I do in the entire denomination that I'm involved in. And our denomination is a missionary denomination of people all over the world. And so why I'm saying that is we believe you have to go to people. Discipleship is going to people and getting involved, inviting them into their life and, talking about the good news and that kind of stuff. So in essence, since this COVID thing happens, unlike the institution of churches, I have not shut down. I just went into smaller groups, into homes, and smaller groups into coffee shops and those kind of things. And we took the necessary appropriate steps, like, if we had to social distance, we did. And if we had to wear a mask, we would. But for the most part, we weren't just balking down doing nothing. Now, there were a couple, like a month or so in there where we didn't have large group gatherings as far as the community is, because I do things right here in the neighborhood, which is reaching the neighborhood. But for the most part, we kept in contact with people and didn't allow COVID to rule our life like I would say the average institution or restaurant or building or business had to, because of the government's mandate. However, I find it we are a free people. That is the basis of America. And right now we're seeing all kinds of pushback on our freedoms, whether it be our freedom to gather, our freedom of religion, our freedom to speak. All these things are being crushed by the government or by institutions that are bigger than the government, like Twitter, YouTube, Google. I've stopped using Google, by the way, completely, and I'm using And I mean as a search engine because that's where their power comes from, man. So I've been using DuckDuckGo so they can't track me, so they can't find, do whatever they do in the background to get my information. Does it sound paranoid? No. Do I trust big tech anymore? Not really. When they become more powerful than the government to suppress freedom, then, I'm out, man. I'm rolling on that one and getting out of there. So anyway, we had Biden's speech last night. It was my goodness. It was everything I could do to, it's a big difference between President Trump speaking and President Biden. I mean, one, you never knew what he was going to say. This one, you were lucky to make it through it without falling asleep. And he, he was right to be called Sleepy Joe because my goodness, what a boring speech that really said nothing. Now, am I excited or happy for those who are going to get their Biden checks? Yeah, I think that's needed. I think the world that they shut down deserves some recompense for businesses and families that really need that. So in my view, a lot of people disagree with me in the conservative world. I think this is a good thing. I think it helps people. It definitely will help my family. I know it'll probably help Steve's family. And if you're honest, it'll probably help your family too. So I'm for that. Now, do I like all the stuff that came in that bill? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, I believe if we would have just took all of the pork out of that bill, I mean, somebody told me like you could give like $40,000 to each family. I don't know if that's true, but I bet you it's a lot more than they're getting. And I just wish they could hone in on that instead of making it all about politics. But we know that Nancy Pelosi, under the last days of Trump, just would not sign any bills, so he would not get any credit. And now they're giving, all of this stuff credit to Biden. We know that we're giving, I don't know how Biden can take, I mean, Biden was literally quoted the other day as saying that he didn't have the vaccination or the vaccine when he came into office. And then we know that he took the vaccination himself publicly. So, I mean, the dude's all over the place. And, I don't know what to say. It's crazy, but this guy is probably the most radical president since Obama that I've ever seen in my life. And he's just really following through with where Obama left off in his presidency as far as social engineering and placing that agenda up front and imposing it on society. And we're going to talk about that later in the show. Now, one of the things that you don't hear anybody talking about, that everybody was talking about, is all of Biden's orders, his executive orders. So I'm going to put this up here too, and hopefully you can see it. Now, I want you to think right now, man, it sounds, do we have a king? Do we have a king? Like, this is insane, right? What was I reading? Hopefully I can pull that up real quick. Is that it? No, I thought I had it over here. I have so many windows open in front of me, I can't even remember. But anyway, Biden is now up to 59 executive orders, over 40 of those. I think it might even be more than that. But if you can see up here, I'm going to scroll really slowly. These are all of his executive orders, which are just insane. And let me ask you, by doing that executive orders, or by him doing this executive orders, how much do you think it's impacted you and I on a daily basis for the good? In other words, is it putting more money in your pocket? Is it helping you and your family? Is it helping businesses? Is it helping the economy? Now, it's crazy, but I mean, I broke them down, not all of them, but you can sort of see here in this chart. This is all on CNN, by the way, which I'm not a follower of CNN, but I wanted to use something where I'm not a follower so you wouldn't think that I'm biased. But 59 executive orders, 11 of them are on immigration, which are combined with like transgender rights and immigration, which are talking about, I think I saw like President Trump was not allowing even limited immigration of those who did not get checked to get coronavirus, he pulled back that mandate as well as everything else that President Trump did on immigration. He's done the second most on equity. Now think of that. Equity, which is, it's different than equality, which means like it's the same outcome. So this is basically the transgender rights, the LGBTQ rights, all this stuff that has been imposed on us, and it's just crazy. And then, like, you would think the most would be on the economy, but there's only 6 by the economy, and then rest by the environment, like getting back into the accord and all this stuff. So it's just really, really crazy when we look at, like, these things aren't being legislated as our government is being intended. It's not going through Congress, being debated in the Senate and then made into the law. He's literally, with the strike of a pen, doing all these things, which means when the next president comes in, he'll probably, with the strike of a pen, come in, if it's a Republican president, just remove all that crap and do his own executive orders. So now we're going to be on an endless cycle of executive orders, both from the one party to the next. You know what I'm saying? And it's just crazy. And if you can see up here, like, here's, it had to be, we had to make this a priority. Equity, reversing the Trump administration's ban on transgender Americans joining the military. Now, I have to admit, if I saw a bunch of transgender with American arsenal on their backs running at me and I'm like a Muslim or something, that would freak me out. But, like, literally, is this a priority? But apparently it is. And well, I keep saying that we're going to get into why in a little bit. But I think another big one, as you can see it up here, is this one. Let me put it to the top so I can, right here. So if you look at the gray one on the top above me, this is another equity executive order which rescinds Trump's administration on the 1776 Commission. Now, that is hugely, we're going to talk about this. This has to do with intersectionality and critical race theory, who are revising American history in order to push forth a political strategy and agenda as far as those things are concerned. And that matters, by the way, which is now they're putting the 1617 Commission or whatever that crap that is, the 1619 Commission, which is basically America is not this great country. It basically started and was built off the back of slaves, which is not true at all. And so by erasing former history, we can make new history. And I think that matters as well. I was watching something by the Wall Builders, which, if you don't know that, they're historians. And this was literally yesterday. And what they were showing was books from the Founding Fathers. For example, like George Washington, he wrote a biography. Did you know that? But now they will not tell you that it's a biography. In fact, if you go on to Wikipedia or something like that, they will say that George Washington's biography isn't legitimate because it's a primary source. Now, when in freaking crap, no, who came up with that idea that primary sources aren't legitimate? And the reason is because in the new version, so if you can see my hand, think of the size of a dictionary, the actual dictionary. That's how big George Washington's book and some of his books were. The ones our kids are getting today would be the size of a novel, like a smut novel, okay, which is like, not like half the width and half the height. And why? What are they rescinding? Well, they're rescinding this idea that he was a Christian guy who had his own principles that he lived out. He's rescinding a lot of his maxims and stuff like that, because they have an agenda that they're pushing. And it can't be that America was a great idea and all this stuff. I mean, like, they're just changing history, like, making it about economics and so forth, and not about the things that it was: freedom of expression, freedom of religion, breaking church from state in order so that we can have freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all these different things. And so these things are being pushed on our kids on a daily basis. Now, I don't have time to get into all of that because we have other things to get into today, but these things are happening right now with our kids. They're changing and modifying history and going back to books that are not primary resources, that are commentary on specific people in specific times rather than the people themselves, which, and some of these books that they're taking history from have been rebutted even back in that day. So these things matter. And so, I hate to say it, I hate to go down this road, but like, this is what China does. China revises history, takes down old statues that remind us of who we are and where we've been, so we don't make those mistakes in the future. And they revise that history in order to get a strategic political outcome that they want right now. And so we're going down that path, I hate to say it. And so what does this all have to do with Biden? Well, we're not ruling in our ruling class as the Constitution intended. Now, can we do executive orders? Sure. Was that the way it was meant to be? Absolutely not. And the question is America better? Are you better? Is Crown Point, Indiana better, or where you live better because of, 11 had to do executive orders on immigration, 10 on equity. You know what I'm saying? 6 only on the economy. Now, some of those economical ones were economy executive orders, I think were necessary. For example, rolling back student loans. So, because people have lost their jobs, how do they pay that? And they just get deeper and deeper in debt. So that was good that he held that off and pushed it down the road. But like, for the average person, though, that's like 1 out of 59 that is actually helping us. So we just have a lot going on in our country, and it's hard not to be a little opinionated when it comes to what's happening politically. I think Steve and I were talking even off camera that, everything now is political. I don't remember ever talking about politics or ever hearing my parents talk about politics for an extended period of time the way we're inundated now because of 24/7 cycles of news and, of course, social media, where everybody's a genius on social media, right? So anyway, that's not the only thing in the news. We have our top 5 pickup lines by Governor Cuomo. And this is an amazing story for if you don't know, then you're probably the average person who's working and not listening to the news every 24 hours. But Governor Cuomo put out, in like a month after the freaking pandemic, he puts a leadership book on how to overcome and be a great leader in times of peril. And in doing so, of course, he's blaming Trump for everything on the whole time, and the media is, eating that up. But he's also posing himself as this great leader, I think, because he wants to probably in 4 years, well, it ain't going to happen now, be the president of the United States. And so he's trying to position himself for that. And then all of a sudden, which is really weird because everybody in the conservative news world knew, by the way, what I'm getting ready to tell you, which is that he was lying about his statistics according of deaths in the COVID crisis. And he was ordering people to do it, and those people came out, which is why he finds himself in a big mess right now. But also that he's been hitting on everything that moves around him. And in a Me Too world, you can't do that, obviously. And now he's trying to play it off. But what's crazy about that is all these people knew about it prior to it, including the left wing, MSNBC and NBC, CNN, all of these left wing news outlets, they knew about it from the get-go. It's coming out. And they said nothing because he served a purpose of getting Trump out of there and just lashing out at Trump. But now that they don't need him and he's sort of like a wounded duck to the party, they're turning on him faster than they can turn on him. And I think today's headline, let me look it up, but I think I just read today's headline in Fox where, I'm going to look it up, where like they're actually, it says the floodgates are open. My goodness, the floodgates are open and everybody's coming out to impeach him. And wow, congressmen and women of New York are coming out and asking him to resign because of his abuse scandal. And what is that abuse? That he's, I'm the governor of New York. Well, I shouldn't say yo. He's like an Italian dude. Yeah. So when you want to come over to spaghetti and get some Cuomosexual feelings going, you could come over to my house. You know what I'm saying? So amid all this stuff, I came up with, let's see if I can find it. I came up with, where did I do with that? The top 5 pickup lines used by Governor Cuomo. Yo, you come over to my house, you come over here and you eat spaghetti, and then we go out and do our thing, yo. So the top 5 pickup lines by Governor Cuomo. Here we go. I'm looking for them right now. I got so much stuff open. I can't even. I did a ton of research today, and so I'm searching all over. I just saw it, and it went behind a bunch of stuff. That tells you how much. Here it is. Top 5 lip lines. I'm gonna do it in my Italian voice. All right, number 5. Hey, baby, it's not sexual harassment if you pull the tube out of grandma's mouth, if you know what I mean. Hey, yo, pull the tube out. Hey, yo. Number 4. Is that good? No? Good? Yeah, I think it's sort of funny. Come on. Remember, I'm flying solo today. Give me some break. Here we go. Hey, yo. Hey, you think grandma needs a shot? Why don't you crawl over here behind my desk? Yo, baby, yo, I got a shot for you, yo. Yo, top 5 lines, pickup lines used by Governor Cuomo. Yo, we need some spaghetti. You want some spaghetti? We got spaghetti. Yo, want a meatball? I got a meatball. Yo, you want to touch my meatballs? No. All right, number 3, is that what we're on? Baby, you take my breath away, just like COVID did to your grandma. Yo, hey, ho, pickup line, cut from Cuomo. Yo, all right. Number 2, top 5 pickup lines used by Governor Cuomo. Yo, hey, baby, those aren't nipple rings. I'm just happy to see grandma dead. Yo, yo, I don't know. I don't even know what that means. And here's our number 1. Let me give you a little drum roll here. I'm giving you a little drum roll. Hoping that's not messing with your ears in the car or whatever. Here it is. Number 1 to the top 5 pickup lines used by Governor Cuomo is, yo, you make me harder than an old lady trying to escape a nursing home. Yo, that's harder. It's harder to escape a nursing home that I put you in. Yo. All right. There it is right there. Our top 5 lines used by Governor Cuomo. We'll be right back right after these messages. I'll see you in a second. right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Again, my name's John Pappas. Thank you for watching the show up to this point. I'm so excited that you would stick around here with me. The second half of this show, I'm just going to go right into it, is going to talk a little bit about the imposition of values on our culture and the changing landscape of our culture. And I'd like to share some information with you that I think might help you understand what's happening and be able to define these things for our own children, because there is a transition in culture happening right now. And so let me start by a question. I'm going to put it out there right now. I'm a missionary, okay? I literally work as a missionary. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because I do a religious podcast about discipleship and about the gospel of Jesus, okay? I put that out there. It's at Inference Swap if you want to go read it or listen to it. And you can see it at inferenceswap.com. But my point in saying is one of the reasons I wanted to do a show like this is to talk about the cultural things that are happening out there that are literally an attack on Judeo-Christian beliefs that I feel this country was founded on. And because of that, we see changing values. So the question I have for you is, what would this country look like without, I hate to say religion, but without God? And right now we know that there's a declining the church is declining. I mean, in fact, the statistics are out that 30% of people that went to church prior to COVID are not going to go. And so it was already an exponential decline. So they're saying, like, by the year 2070, somewhere around there, within 10 years, that America will be less than 3% Christian. Now, having said that, I do not believe if you're atheist or don't believe in God, and I'm not talking about religious, that's a whole other discussion. I'm just talking about belief in God and believing our morality comes from God. But I do believe that if you're an atheist, you can have morals, right? But I believe all truth comes from God, and ultimately morality is grounded in God, right and wrong. And, that's a whole different discussion for a different day, but that doesn't mean you can't be, quote, good if you're an atheist. The problem with there being nothing that is we're accountable to, in other words, no God, is that anything goes. There's no one to say this is right or this is wrong. There's no moral grounds for that. And when that happens, then society itself becomes the moral legislator, if you will, and that's exactly what we're seeing in our culture today. Now, I'm going to jump right into it because I don't want to be here on all time, but my plan is to show you something that's happening, show you the imposition of something happened, how it relates to culture, and then talk about intersectionality, critical race theory, and we're going to get into gender dysphoria, because these are the three things that are being pushed up front culturally through the government right now. And like they're even creating language around this so that if you go against that language, they will impose their value and judgment and cancel you. That is a judgment, a court judgment I would say a court judgment by the mob, if you will. So here we go. CNN recently has just put this out. This is just like a week ago, February. A little longer than a week, but February 24th. And the idea here is that this is a photographer showing us, see if I can post it up there. If you're not watching this, you need to go on YouTube and check this out. This is the imposition of a transgender lifestyle being photographed for us through vivid self-portraits that we are supposed to accept. In other words, I'm supposed to accept what this person is doing and call them by the name that they want to be called by simply because they feel that it's correct. Now, we're going to talk about all of this in a second, but I feel this is an imposition on my rights, and I feel like this is an imposition on science, if you will. This is pseudo-freaking science. I don't care what they say. So here it is. We see, this is hard to look at, but this is supposed to be the new norm. And this guy, we are supposed to call a girl. And here it is. There's a picture of him trying to transition. They're trying to make it, sexy by showing that apple. But here he is with his, injections, hormone injections or puberty blockers or whatever they are, in order to help him transition. Now, of course, there's several things we could say about this, but this is an acceptable reality in our culture right now, and they're trying to make it normalized, correct? But ask yourself from a scientific standpoint, what animals just transition on a whim by a decision from guy to girl? You get what I'm saying? So if we took their evolutionary standard as fact, which that's an argument within itself, but let's just say we take their evolutionary standard in biology and all these things. What animal does what we're doing? Where does this come from? This is obviously a new phenomenon. Now, I'm not saying transgender is a new phenomenon. We know that's been around for a while. But I'm saying, are we making something that is sincerely a mental health issue a normalization? And if so, will that happen with everything else that we deem necessary not to be mental health issue? So, and we're gonna talk about that. And here's the last picture: the beauty of fluidity. They're talking about it. So, what could possibly be the motivation to push this up front into the agenda that we're seeing put up in front of us? Now, I'm going to show you another outcome. So that kind of stuff. Let me say this: like yesterday, Kim and I, my wife and I, are watching commercials about showers. And all of a sudden, there's a transgender guy in there. All of a sudden, every commercial is interracial. All of a sudden, there's homosexuality. Two guys talking about medicine, holding hands. You know what I mean? And so all of this stuff is played out in commercials on national TV now, or whatever cable we're watching, and it's just out there, and we're constantly inundated with these values. Okay, so we cannot say that that's not true. So let me show you how this plays out in society. So what I'm getting ready to show you now is, listen to this. This is a story that came out yesterday. It says a woke $57,000 a year New York school bans students from saying mom and dad, asking classmates when they go on vacation never to say Merry Christmas or Happy New Year. So here's sort of the highlights of this article. It says it's called Grace Church. Believe it or not, this is a Christian school where they pay $50,000 a year to go to. Offered a 12-page guide, which I'm going to show you here in a second, to staff and to students on inclusive language. Okay, now, this is an Episcopal church, and Episcopalians are they basically have failed as a religion, and so they're just basically going, we'll take anybody at this point. If you don't know, like traditional religions like Episcopalian Catholicism, those kind of religions, they're on a horrible decline in the world and in America. And the decline of the church is one thing, which is absolutely horrendous. It's exponential. You cannot, I don't know if we can go back. But in the traditional religions like Catholicism or Episcopalianism especially, it's just, they're almost done. So I think they're on their last leg, and this is some of the things they do to try to keep their denomination going, if you will. So what's in this thing? It says mom and dad or parents are outlawed. You can't say those things. It urges them not to wish anybody a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. It asks for an end to questions on whether a person went on vacation. Notice the language there, a person. As part of our Episcopalian identity, there it is, we recognize the dignity, worth of the common to humanity. Okay, so let me just say this right now as I pull up the next thing. So here it is. You can go to Daily Mail. You can look this up. You can see the link in the picture here, but you can just look it up and you're going to find it everywhere. But here's my point. Let me say this as a Christian, nobody. I do not believe that transgender people, homosexual people do not deserve rights. As an American, you get American rights, okay? But it's another thing giving people rights, and another thing saying that this is what the normal family looks like. This kind of family is the best for children. And it's another whole other thing to impose the values of language, of what you can and cannot say on our children in order to change the culture. It always starts with language, right? If you want to change language in a or culture in a company, you change the language and then therefore try to change the attitudes. Now, this is just like easy stuff, right? Like this is how you do these kind of things. But let me just go through some of these rules that are before you. Now, what you see on the screen before you now is their 12-page guide, if you will, to inclusive language, which they're imposing at K through 12. Think about that. So you got a kindergartner, you know what I'm saying? These are the values you're paying for. So as I look at this, so the goal is to give them an inclusive language to change culture. And in doing so, any other kind of notice like on this second part I'm going to highlight right here for you. You can see that right there. It says, we recognize that this will ban hateful language. So if you don't use this language, you're using hateful language. If I call there, I'm expected to call that guy in that picture we just saw a chick simply because he feels like a chick. Do you get what I'm saying? And now let me say this. If that guy was standing here, I'm not going to go out of my way to insult him. But biologically, it's absurd for me to call him what he wants to be called, specifically what he wants, if he's going to make me call him that. All right, I might do it out of politeness, but I'm not going to do it because he makes me do it. You get what I'm saying? Because it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's absurd by scientific proof and biological proof. I don't know what they want. But let's go on to the imposition of this language. But I want you to see, like, by inundating us with images, music, video, even the news like CNN now, with images of all of this kind of stuff, it's normalized and now it's being included in children's education and therefore being imposed from generation to generation. Now look what it says here in this, when they're talking against gender here. They're saying, instead of using the terms boys and girls, here I am, if you can see it in the picture here. So if you're listening, I'm literally reading their documentation, and it says, instead of saying boys or girls or guys or ladies and gentlemen, at their school from now on, you can say people, folks, friends, readers, mathematicians. In other words, you can use their title, but you don't need to be so offensive by calling them a gender. I don't know whatever. When reading a book, rather than the boy and the girl on this passage, just say child, person, or character. Think about that, right? Instead of saying sweetheart, honey, or any kind of pet name like that, we just say child, friend, or that person in a blue shirt. And it's just absurd. It keeps going on like this and on like this and on like this. From another perspective, they get into the reality of cisgender and pronouns and all this stuff that they define for you and the reasons why, which it's just crazy. But think about it. They go on into the family life, and this is a complete breakdown. Like we're seeing through sexuality, the breakdown in the family and how people are okay with that. But now we're breaking down the person themselves when it comes to transgenderism. And we'll get into all of this kind of stuff in a minute. But I just wanted to see this language is now, they're not allowed to say mom and dad. So my mom and dad came to pick me up. Oh, Bobby, what do we say? Oh, we say grown-ups, folks, and family, Mrs. whatever, and so. Can you say Mrs.? I don't know. Teacher Joe or Teacher Sue. Instead of saying parents, you can't say grown-ups, folks, family, or guardians. Instead of nana or nanny or babysitter, we say caregiver or guardian. Instead of somebody is adopted, somebody was adopted. You see how they're doing? Instead of husband, wife, boyfriend, or girlfriend, we say spouse, partner, or significant other. So my reason in showing you this is that this is now prevalent and it's hitting our children, right? So we've always had this idea that well, if it doesn't hurt me, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? And I think this is the approach many people have taken when it comes to all the racial stuff, all of the sexuality and gender stuff. But it has come to us. We do know that it's come to us. So we've really entered the age of non-truth, identity, and intersectionality. And so maybe you haven't heard this terminology before, but if you have not, I want to help you understand this stuff because it's playing out right in front of us everywhere, I'm saying. So what I'm talking about is what we're seeing in reality is what we call postmodernism. Now, maybe you've heard that term before, but postmodern is in a sense just a rebellion against modernism, where in that era, they believed there was absolute or universal truth. And a postmodernist truth then would be that there is no such thing as truth. Now, right away, when I say something like that, you're probably like, well, wait a second, that seems like a contradiction in the term itself. And you'd be absolutely right, because they're proclaiming, in essence, that what is absolutely true, the thing that they know that is absolutely true, is that there is no truth, which is just a logical fallacy, right? But this is the era we live in, and this is what we see playing out in our world. Now, we don't have time to go into absolute detail how this came about. However, the importance of this is really twofold. First, it dismisses the idea of God as truth, which I sort of talked about a little bit. But Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so 2 plus 2, by the way, equals 4. That truth is very narrow, but it's also universal, right? And what's weird about it is that is a truth that is true outside of us, whether we believe in God or not. You know, so I mean, I think it can be argued that that truth came from God because he is the truth, but that's a whole other, we don't have time to get into that. But the point of it is that truth is often narrow, and it's often universal, and it's often outside. It's something we discover. So we see first is that God is truth, and it dismisses that. And so therefore Christianity, or Judeo-Christianity, becomes an imposition of morality and values on the world around them. So, for example, even though scientifically and philosophically it can be proven that God is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, all-powerful, all-knowing, which proves that all Eastern religions would be absolutely false then, postmodernism would say, you're imposing your truth on their truth. So that's one importance. Secondly, I think we need to understand in many ways it turns science into a subjective search for one's truth rather than the truth of any given topic. Now, in my opinion, this is the reason we see so much pseudoscience and denial of absolute facts, for example, concerning biology. So postmodernism is an ideology, as an ideology means whatever your truth is your truth, and whatever my truth is, it's my truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. Now, a lot of us say, well, that's fine as long as you don't hurt me, I don't care. However, we're living in this time where we have a transgender, for example, a transgender assistant health secretary who will not answer the question whether parents can refuse their child's gender transition, right? And we seen this, I think last week, Steve and I showed a video of Rand Paul actually interviewing this person who would not deny such a thing and would allow then, therefore, I think the natural outcome of that could be that the government will have more power over your children than the parents. And there's no way. I would hope that America would allow that, but in a sense, we are. We also know that we have transgender athletes competing in women's sports. Notice that it's never the other way around. In other words, you see transgender men practicing with female or going into female athletics, but it's never transgender women going into male athletics. We don't see any of that because why? Because they can't compete. That's the short and narrow of that one, right? Steve and I showed last week a MMA fighter that was transgender that crushed the skull of a woman who was dared to get in the ring with this guy. We also showed a 51-year-old man playing college basketball. So this imposition of their culture and the strategic political construct that they're throwing out into our culture is playing out in the real world, but who it hurts is probably the female and the programs they're involved with. And now I just showed you that school systems are enforcing this kind of language and this kind of mentality on K through 12 students, right? They're not allowed to call boys and girls, or ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. They have to call them folks, friends, or some title of a teacher. So I suppose any title would be okay as long as it's not pastor, right? Anyway, so they're changing language, they're changing culture all around us, and they've done it while we've kicked back and allowed it to happen. And we should care because their denial of our set of values, Judeo-Christian values, is really an imposition of theirs in exchange for another. And that's exactly the truth. Now, if you don't believe in God, again, this makes sense. But if you do believe in God, then everything's up for grab. Now, when I think of postmodernism, when it comes to sociology, or even the whole person as a whole, if the person believes in truth, it would mean that there's a God. It would mean that God's attributes, such as love and truth, would make that person it would make that person accountable to him. He's our creator, and thus we are made in his image, and his attributes are instilled in us, which means that we would have equal footing and the ability to understand and guide and help and live in such a way where maybe possibly some kind of harmony could happen based on a certain base of values, because we believe in this absolute truth. But if we don't, if a person is a postmodernism or postmodernist, most likely they won't believe in God. And if they do, it's one formed out of their own thinking. In other words, they believe in God, but not the God of the Bible. They might say they believe in Jesus, but Jesus is more like them than them being like Jesus. Now, we all have that problem as Christians, where none of us are perfect. We know Jesus is perfect, but the morality that comes from living out our identity in Christ is different from those who impose their identity on Christ and call him God. Now, that God I don't believe in either. In other words, like if you make up some kind of God that you call Jesus that is more like you than it is like the Jesus of the Bible, I don't believe in that God either. That's a false God. So that means that it would be subservient to them instead of the other way around. But this would mean that truth is not something outside of them that they serve or discover, but rather they themselves turn inward and create their own truth. And therefore, a person could invent who they are or want to be. And if they live in a postmodern society, that society would be expected to accept whatever identity or claim that's thrust upon them. Does this make any sense to anybody? It's exactly what's happening, right? So the difference is, instead of having an absolute standard which most people live by, or some common value that most people live in because of God and because of our belief in God, you break that down and then everything goes, and I look within myself. I could call myself a cat man, become a cat, and you as a postmodern society have to absolutely believe that that is true, and you're expected to believe whatever I claim is true. Now, this is how, for example, instead of saying gender dysphoria is a mental illness that needs to be treated as such, they can turn that saying on society and say there is no problem biologically or chemically with anybody, or even mentally with anybody, that the problem is society not accepting what's being brought before them. So make no mistake, theoretical postmodern pseudoscience is really the problem here. It's not real science. It's not real biology. You see what I'm saying? When it comes to postmodernism in society, it has social consequences. Now, let's take it a step further. Take critical race theory and intersectionality. Now, these are terms that are thrown out there if you're watching the news all the time. But do you know what they mean? They're hot topic words. In our culture right now, critical race theory is now used in our government, in our schools, as a way to reshape society, and we see it every day. Has anybody ever said you have white privilege? In essence, it's a breakdown of society to put people in groups in order to get a certain outcome. So we're going to talk about what this is. Critical race theory is a tool by which sociologists use to view and analyze the sociological structures of society. And what we're getting here is a tool. I guess what I'm saying here is this tool a tool to build up society or break it down? That's the question we have to ask. Is it good for society or is it taking us down? Now, I would say it's taking us down. But what is it? So to understand what it is, we have to sort of go, okay, we have to break down the terminology itself, critical race theory. So what does the critical part of critical race theory mean? Well, critical, when applied to race theory, means to analyze in extreme closeness the use of language and history of those who are oppressed in order to enact a revolution on the current political power dynamics. Huh? Does this sound familiar? Does this look familiar? So the common implementation is to scope through every piece of history, think of American history, looking for the problems that you wouldn't quite see in this case, we're talking about race. So context, circumstances, conditions surrounding all those factors mean nothing. What matters is only the evil that they're looking for. It is designed to focus only on the problem. Think about that. So what do they mean by theory when we're talking about critical race theory? This is not the normal definition that we're sort of used to. For example, we're taking theory. We're not taking theory in the sense of scientific theory, I guess is a way to say that. In this case, what is meant by theory is twofold. First, theory is derived out of the critical legal theory language, which likewise, as we're going back through history, looks and tries to pick apart all the laws and pick apart all the horrible stuff that either affected or didn't affect political change. And second, it's referring to postmodern theory. And that's important to understand. It's why I'm going through this. So here we're back to postmodernism. And what this means in this case of critical race theory is that knowledge is produced within various communities that are unique to itself. So the knowledge in certain groups are unique to themselves. And therefore that unique knowledge cannot be evaluated from the outside in any other community. And this is applied in critical race theory to mean that if you take people of a certain race who have a certain oppression based on racial status, or even on the flip side, you take people that are a certain race who have a certain dominance, if that race happens to be in power, each group will have its own view on oppression, and each group will have a special insight that would not be available to the other or anyone outside those groups. So therefore, you would have to defer to that group's specific knowledge as though that knowledge is true. And if you're not in that group, you cannot question it or doubt it. This is what's being taught to your children. If you're wondering why they went to college and came back crazy, this is why. So in essence, you're not allowed to ask or demand for a different analysis of a group of people or speak against the legitimacy of anything that they're claiming as knowledge or force your knowledge upon them. So in that sense, any particular identity group that makes a truth claim, if you're not part of it, you have no option but to agree with it because you're not one of them. Think about that. But I want to take it a little bit further, I guess. Let's take it a little bit further. Let's say taking it a little bit further would be intersectionality. Intersectionality means the interconnected nature of social categorization. So I am reading that, by the way. I don't memorize this crap. I looked into it. So what does that mean? It basically means you divvy up in society. Tell me if you don't think this is happening. Groups by race, class, and gender for the purpose of seeing and creating an overlapping and independent systems of discrimination and disadvantage. So in essence, when we're talking about identity politics, here we go. You lap people into all these different groups and in all these disadvantages, and then you form power by subdividing these identity groups to try to remove individuality and one's own agency, so that they're part of a group of oppressed people that have a lived out experience. There's another expression, so that they conform to the same knowledge as a group of whole, so that specific knowledge can be used against the current power dynamic to obtain and justify and create its own power or sustain its own power. It does not matter what they do not see, if they do not see things as they are, because they have their own truth and that's the way they see them. It's their truth. So here we are in America, right? This is why I'm explaining it. This is the problem with postmodernism, which is we're fluent in postmodernism at this point, unless you believe in God, right? The problem, of course, is this is just like pseudoscientific tools for political strategy. The master tools of humanity are gone. What are those? Things like science, reason, logic, exegesis, those things. History. We're changing history so we can change the political strategy of what's coming in order to create a new narrative and a new story for people to live into. This is what's going on in our time right now. So, let's say this seems crazy to you. Well, they would argue that these tools of reason, logic, science, anything like that, they're invited by the people group called white straight men that came out, and those things came out of their privilege, and therefore they're just legitimizing their own experience, so that doesn't delegitimize their group's experience. They would claim that there are other ways of knowing, for example, like emotion, feeling, see? And because God doesn't exist, there's no God's eye view to fall back on. You see how that works? So, if you believe no objective truth is possible, and I would say they believe no objective truth is possible, and there is only truth within the culture you're from, and that culture has its own claims, and you cannot evaluate that knowledge from another cultural milieu. So in practice, what this looks like is that no one can say they have a more authoritative knowledge than someone else. Each group within society has its own language, knowledge, and of course, values. Now, it would be cool if they left it there, right? But they would say, emotion can be a pathway to legitimate knowledge. You know what I'm saying? But here's the problem. Let's say this is legitimate. But ask yourself, if it was the Ku Klux Klan who put a cross in a black neighbor's lawn, does this mean we're not supposed to judge those actions because, well, within their own culture, within their own cultural milieu, they have their own truth? Yet, of course, we'll say no, right? But if you apply that kind of logic to any other people group, well, racist, misogynist, homophobic, all these things, transgender phobic, whatever it is. Now, the reason I'm telling you is I hope this help you understand what's happening in the world around you. And I spoke to a neighbor recently. I live in Northwest Indiana somewhere, and they were going to a high school robotics thing. And this girl came to me and she's like, these kids are confused about their sexuality. They're 13, they're 14 years old, and they're using pronouns instead of, he or she, boy or girl, like all the ones they're banning in the school. And the reason why I'm saying this is because parents are allowing this stuff to happen based on what? Political strategy and power grabs, not common sense science. And these parents are not coming into the reality of common sense and basic biology. And I'll even go further, because of our lack, let me say this on twofold. First, parents have a lack of understanding of God. And second, because churches have allowed the culture to exist on its own. They've continued to do what they think works, despite the statistics showing that none of it works, to be honest with you. I shouldn't say it's not good for the people that go, but if you don't go directly to a church, then how are these people supposed to understand God and know God? And they're only knowing God by the God they get some glimpse of in that building, right? And so they don't see God as he is or hear about God as he is. They have these cultural understanding of Christianity, which is nowhere near who God is or what or anything like that. No understanding of God's grace, no understanding of the good news. Yet churches have perpetuated this thinking for hundreds of years and allowed the culture to get to the point where it is now. I believe it's the fault of the church. I actually believe that. That doesn't mean there's not good pastors, there's not good churches. I'm saying we've taken a posture in the world that is not biblical, where we just go and become consumers. It's the same thing, like if you need shoes, you go to a shoe store. If you need some spiritual guidance, you go to church. And it's become a consumeristic transaction rather than an identity lived out before others. Back to identity, right? So we have the problem in the church. We have the problem in the world, a world left to its own. We have theory, like critical race theory, intersectionality, dysphoria, all these things that are becoming postmodern truths in a society, and no one's pushing back because they're legitimizing emotions and feelings to be rational truth facts, and they're not. And because we don't have this compass of God anymore, we don't have the gall to stand up and fight and go, we will not allow our children to be raised like this. Instead, we're going, it don't matter. It does matter. It does matter. Now, I don't have time to get into this statistics of a healthy family, but families are the foundation of a great society. And when those things break down, as they have been in America, we're going to a place of just radicalness that if we don't stop and we don't check our hearts, where do we go from here? And I would also say, let me say this. I'm not advocating for any kind of hatred. I'm saying we got to love people. We got to love them towards the Lord and towards one another. We have to open our doors again and be accessible to one another, even showing our flaws. And that's how you get to truth, right? When I played hoops, I learned more from my failures than I did mostly. My failures led to my successes. When I played baseball, when I played basketball, when I played football, academically, I learned through failures. It's okay to fail if we keep pressing forward as a community towards God and towards the things that are best for society and people groups. So again, I ask you, and I'm going to leave you with this today, what will America be without God? That will be the question of the fate of America if we don't actively and get educated about such things, both biblically and, I guess, for education's sake, and most of all for our children's sake. So I wanted to share that with you. Now, Steve might even be mad that I even brought some of this stuff up today, not because he doesn't believe these things, but we wanted to keep it lighthearted today. But I thought I'd go a little deeper for you guys today so you could see these are the foundation. When I was at Chi Alpha doing stuff at the university I was doing at, these are the kind of things that I ran into, and I had to do a deep dive and try to understand where this thinking comes from, because this is not legitimate scientific. I just keep going back there. It's just not legitimate knowledge. It's not that your feelings aren't real. It's just they're not facts. And that's different. And we need to slant ourselves, we as whole people, not break. I think, they're breaking down society into groups, but we're breaking down the person into a group too, so that we can separate gender from biology. And that's insane. That is insane. And if we're going to look at each other like animals, like evolutionary thinking, tell me what animal does that. Can you think of one? So anyway, I know I could have been, should have done some, Biden jokes, like, here's a Biden joke. If Joe Biden was told that he needed to assemble his cabinet, so the next thing he did is he went to IKEA, and when he got there, he realized he was in the wrong place. Ba-doom-chew. All right, I'll shut up. I know you guys got to go. Thank you for listening. Listen, I'm thinking Steve will be back next week. Let's pray for his family. Hope you enjoyed this. I dropped some knowledge today. I don't know much, but I know I love you. Hey, subscribe to Facebook. Subscribe to our TalkdaTalk podcast. We'll be back next week. I hope this at least made you think. Leave some comments below. We don't hate anybody around here. We're just assessing things through a different set of eyes, and that's okay. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching TalkdaTalk. Subscribe. I'll see you later.